podcast. I'm your host, as always, Adam Martin, and I'll be taking you guys through the latest in the world of mixed martial arts. You can follow me on Twitter at MMAOB, and this podcast is available, as always, at MMAOddsbreaker.com. Go to our YouTube channel, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about it. Also, check me out at bjpen.com and MMARings.net. Quite a bit of news to talk about today. Also, fight announcements. But let's get right into it. There is possibly some breaking news. I'm going to talk about the end of the show because it's not official yet, but I definitely want to mention this. I'll wait a little bit to talk about it. I'm going to talk about the things that actually have happened and we know about, including the first thing I want to talk about here. The Bellator-RIZIN card's official. It will take place in Japan in December, close to New Year's Eve, and the main event, Fedor versus Rampage. So this is kind of news that we've known about for a while, but now it's official. So Fedor Emelianenko versus Rampage Jackson in a Pride throwback fight. I love this matchup. I know both guys are at the tail end of their careers and they haven't looked that great lately, but still, like, this is an exciting fight. You know, two guys that really are two of the best fighters ever, two legends of the sport. They all obviously are in their 40s now. Fedor's 43, Rampage is 41, and both guys coming off of some pretty lackluster performances, but you know, it's still a good fight. It's going to take place on the feet for the most part. Someone's going to get brutally knocked out, no doubt about it. So Fedor, 38-6-1 record, one of the greatest of all time. Coming off a loss to Ryan Bader by knockout, but before that, had beaten Chael Sonnen and Frank Mir by TKO in the Bellator Heavyweight Grand Prix. Also lost to Matt Mitrione by KO. So 2-2 since coming back to Bellator, but still one of the greatest ever. So, you know, you can't count out Fedor, man. The guy still has knockout power. His chin obviously is not there anymore, but with that KO power, you can't count out of any fight. And Jackson obviously is going to willingly go with him in the feet. This is going to be a very good striking fight, I believe. Rampage actually coming off a TKO win over Wanderlei Silva last year, and I think that was their fourth fight. So this should be good. I'm excited for this matchup. I really am. I know that they're both older, like I said, and people are criticizing Bellator for booking this fight, but come on, this is what the fans want. I think some fans do want to see this, including myself. You know, I'd rather see these guys fight each other than fight, you know, up and comers or fight wrestlers. You're going to see these guys stand the feet and trade, and that sounds like a pretty good fight to me. So, you know, not an easy fight to call. I truly believe Fedor is the better fighter, but his chin has just not looked very good. Rampage, for all his faults, he still has a pretty good chin. He can still take a punch, and he showed in that last fight with Wanderlei. He's still got KO power, so tough fight to call. But I mean, I feel like you kind of have to favor Rampage a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, he did beat Wanderlei in their fourth fight, but you know, before that he lost to Chael Sonnen, got struck by Chael. So you got to remember that as well. Having said that, though, I think with the chin advantage and he does have KO power, you slightly have to lean towards Rampage, slightly younger as well. I just wouldn't count Fedor either. So great fight. I love it personally. I know it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but should be interesting. And I should mention there's no other fights really booked for that card yet, but they did mention there's going to be 3 other Bellator versus RIZIN fights. You'd have to imagine Kyoji Horiguchi is going to be one of those fights. So don't know who he's going to fight, but possibly Juan Archuleta. That was supposed to happen. So maybe that'll happen on this card. Not too sure, but it is pretty interesting. We'll do those fights. Also, Ryan Bader could fight Yuri Prochazka, who's the light heavyweight champion in RIZIN. That could be a really good fight if it happens. I wouldn't count Yuri out of that fight. Even though Bader's looked amazing, Yuri's actually quite a good fighter himself. So that could be a good fight. I am looking forward to this card. Again, I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but personally I'm looking forward to it because it's like giving me that nostalgic feeling of the old Pride days. And yes, it's a fight that probably should happen 15 years ago. Let's be fair here. But hey, this is happening. 2019, right before the decade ends, and 2020 is just around the corner. So Rampage Jackson, Fedor Emelianenko, main event of the the RIZIN Bellator card at the end of the year. All right, a bunch of other pieces of news here. Anthony Johnson, he was at the Dominance MMA Media. A bunch of the Ali Abdelaziz-based fighters were there. Frankie Edgar, Justin Gaethje, Kamaru Usman, Kelvin Gastelum, all these guys were there. Rumble was one of the guys that a lot of the reporters were talking to, and he said he's targeting a return for April 2020. So obviously that's big news. Rumble Johnson, one of the best light heavyweights in the world. He'll be moving up to heavyweight when he comes back. I think that's a great move for him. He's put on a lot of weight since he's taking his retirement. So moving up to heavyweight makes a lot of sense. He's fought a heavyweight before in WSOF. He fought a heavyweight, beat Orlovsky there like I think 5 or 6 years ago. So I think heavyweight's a great move for him. And he says he wants to fight Francis Ngannou. So I mean that's a dream fight. And I put it out there on BJ Penn, wrote the article, and it blew up. Fans want to see this fight. Anthony Johnson versus Francis Ngannou. It sounds like a great fight to me. Francis actually wants to fight soon. He doesn't have an opponent. Rumble, in April, that's probably a little too late for Francis to fight him, but I still feel like this fight could happen at some point. I do believe Francis will probably fight the winner of DC and Stipe, the trilogy, for the title, but if he wins that fight, or even if he loses that fight, I think Rumble is absolutely in line for a big fight, including a fight against Ngannou. And hey, if he beats Ngannou, you could do Rumble for the title against Stipe or DC or whoever's the champ at that point. If DC wins, he probably retires. Hard to say too what the future is going to look like. You can't look too far in the future right now, because if DC wins, he's probably going to end up giving the belt back, and then you might do Stipe versus Francis for the vacant title. I don't really know, but Rumble Johnson's probably, even though he hasn't fought a heavyweight yet, even though he's been retired for 3 years, he's probably like 1 or 2 fights away from the title, just because that heavyweight division is very wide open. There aren't a ton of fresh contenders, but I do think Rumble would be a really good opponent for anyone. I mean, even the winner of Walt Harrison and Alistair Overeem, that would be an interesting fight for Rumble too. That fight's in December. That actually fits really well with Rumble's timetable. So there's some good fights for him. Curtis Blades, the winner of Volkov JDS, the loser of that fight even. Lots of fights for Rumble Johnson. I'm excited for his return. I know obviously he's dealing with stuff outside the octagon, and some of the stories are not very nice to hear. However, as far as him as a fighter goes, the guy's awesome, and I'm excited for his return to the cage. Israel Adesanya and Jon Jones have continued to trade jabs over social media. We know these guys don't like each other. They're just really setting up this future fight between them, and I love it personally. Again, I want to see this fight next, but it's going to probably take a little while to get done. But Jon Jones, really feeding the fire in this one, and Adesanya, he's defending himself, all over the place on social media as well. Just not going to let Jon Jones stomp all over him. So I think at some point we will see this fight. I love this matchup personally. You guys know I love it. I think Adesanya is one of the few guys that can actually give Jon Jones problems, because he matches him pretty well physically as far as height and reach go. Obviously, the weight would be in Jon Jones's advantage. He'd probably take down Adesanya and try to beat him up on the ground. But Adesanya, man, he's a special guy. I personally am very excited for this fight. And I should mention, the opening odds have been released for this matchup. Again, it's not official. It's not going to happen for a while, because Adesanya is fighting Costa next, and Jones probably will fight Chris Weidman, if I had to guess, if Weidman wins against Dominic Reyes. But Adesanya opens as a plus 375 underdog. Jon Jones minus 550 favorite. Not surprised Jones is a big favorite here. I think Cole yesterday on the podcast, he kind of pegged Adesanya as a bigger underdog at like plus 800. I personally saw it a little bit less. Like I said, I think this fight's closer than some people will say, but there's no doubt Jon Jones will be a big favorite. And if that fight happens, I'd assume he probably would be like a minus 500-600 favorite, just because it's Jon Jones. At some point, at this point, you can't bet against him. But Adesanya is the one guy that I really truly believe can give Jon Jones actual problems, because again, his length and reach, undefeated, his momentum, his mentality as an undefeated fighter, his confidence. There's a lot of things to like about Israel Adesanya. Speaking of the middleweight division, Kelvin Gastelum was another fighter at the Dominance MMA media session, and he ripped Robert Whittaker. He was not happy with his performance. He basically said Whittaker went in there and he didn't do anything well, and he thought that he would have did a much better job against Adesanya. It's hard to disagree with Kelvin Gastelum. I mean, he had a fight against Adesanya earlier this year, and he did really well in that fight. Obviously, Adesanya ended up winning. It basically went down to the 5th round. Adesanya took it, but a super close fight. And Adesanya proved he was a better man. But I do think Kelvin Gastelum is a great fighter. I've always said that. I've been high on this guy forever. It was pretty scathing review of Robert Whittaker's performance, but I can see why he's pissed. I mean, we have to remember what happened back at UFC, 234, when Robert Whittaker pulled out with that late injury, and Gastelum was left without a fight. So I can see why he's still a little pissed off at Robert Whittaker. But hey, you know what? He had a shot against Adesanya too and lost. Let's be fair. He did lose that fight. However, he's right. Whittaker, his game plan wasn't very good. I mean, let's be honest here, guys. He kind of just went in and tried to bull rush Adesanya. That doesn't work. You can't do that against a really super technical striker like that with excellent counter abilities. It's like, it reminded me of Forrest Griffin versus Anderson Silva from back in the day a little bit. Just Forrest running in and just getting hit with so many counters. And obviously it was just as devastating. Robert Whittaker got knocked down twice and knocked out in the second round. So I think Kelvin, some of the stuff he said was right. But at the same time, I feel like he's still just really salty from the fact that they weren't able to fight at UFC 234 earlier this year because of Whittaker's late injury. Justin Gaethje was another fighter at the Dominance MMA media session. A lot of fighters were there. Justin Gaethje was there, and him and Ali Abdelaziz just completely blasted Conor McGregor. Basically, Gaethje said that Conor, he really doesn't deserve to get a title fight, and he just basically said, you got to either fight or just quit the sport because Conor hasn't fought in so long. Gaethje questioned the rankings. He's like, why is this guy ranked number 3 when he hasn't fought in 2 years in MMA and only has a 1-1 record at lightweight? And it's a good point. I mean, he did beat Eddie Alvarez, but he lost to Khabib. It's hard to say where Conor is at lightweight. I would imagine he's still a top 5 guy. But Gaethje's right. I mean, 1 win in 3 years, that really mean you're a top 3 guy in that division. It's kind of crazy, right? So he's right. Conor's got to come back soon. He's got to get a fight. There's no way in hell Conor deserves a title fight. I know he wants it. He wants that Khabib rematch. He thinks he's entitled to it, but he's got to fight one of the top contenders. You either do Conor versus Gaethje, you do Conor versus Poirier, you do Conor versus Cerrone. Heck, even do Conor versus Dan Hooker. At this point, I don't care. I just want to see this guy fight. Hopefully he fights soon. Hopefully he comes back soon. And I think Gaethje versus Conor is a great fight. I've said that for a long time. I've been saying that probably for over a year now that I'd like to see that fight. So we'll see what happens. I do believe we'll see Conor back next year. I think probably in the early part of the year, January, February, there will be pay-per-views that need main events. Gaethje versus McGregor sounds great to me, but, McGregor, Poirier, anything with McGregor sells. Hopefully he comes back, though. The UFC needs him back. The fighters want him back, and the fans want him back. So hopefully McGregor can just take a fight, but I think he's got to realize now that he's not going to be getting that title fight with Khabib. Tony Ferguson's getting it. And, if Ferguson doesn't get it, I still don't want to see Conor fight Khabib. I'd rather see Gaethje fight Khabib than Conor. He doesn't deserve it. There's no doubt about it. I know he's a big name, but he does not deserve a title shot. And you can't reward a guy for being like a terrible person outside the cage and getting in trouble with the law and losing his last fight and then give him a title shot. That would be a terrible look. I wouldn't put it past the UFC completely, but come on, this guy needs to get a win. All right, a couple of fight announcements. UFC Tampa gets a fight replacement matchup between Thomas Gifford and Mike Davis. So obviously, Brock Weaver unfortunately had to pull out with an injury. So now Thomas Gifford will take on Mike Davis, a short notice opponent, taking the fight on just 4 days' notice. I talked a little bit about this with Cole Sheldon yesterday. The news broke during the show, so there's still no odds out for this one. I'm assuming they'll be out in the next day or so. But Thomas Gifford, 27 years old, 14-8, 2-0 contest, lost his UFC debut to Roosevelt Roberts. Prior to that, had a 5-fight undefeated streak. Really no notable wins in his career. He's fought a couple decent names like Anthony Rocco Martin and his last fight, Roosevelt Roberts. But for the most part, I haven't been too impressed with this guy. He does have quite a few finishes, but his lack of competition definitely concerning. Mike Davis, 6-2 record. Again, taking the fight on short notice, 27 years old. He lost his USA debut to Gilbert Burns. He also lost to Sodiq Yusuff on the Contender Series last summer. Overall, like I said, just 6-2, but all his wins by stoppage, by knockout, and the losses to Yusuff and Burns, those are not bad losses. I actually think Davis has a good chance to win this fight, even with the short notice. We've seen guys win on short notice before. Conor Worthy won a few months ago on a week's notice or something, a couple days' notice. I don't think Thomas Gifford's a UFC caliber fighter, so I actually think Mike Davis probably wins this fight, and I personally would actually consider playing him as a dog. I know he's moving up in weight and fighting a guy who's been training, but he wouldn't have taken this fight if he didn't think he could win it. And I don't think he'd take this fight if he wasn't training and prepared. So I would take Mike Davis in this fight again as a dog, but I got to see the odds. I mean, he might open as a favorite. I assume he'll open as a dog just because of the short notice, but don't write this guy off. Thomas Gifford is not a great fighter, and 14-8 record is not great either. So I would definitely take a look at Mike Davis. Myself and Cole Sheldon, we did break down the whole card yesterday. I think I took 2 underdogs. This would probably be the third, again, if he's a dog. But I think most people are taking most of the favorites. You'll see a few underdogs win. I think Davis could be one of those dogs. So, again, need to see the odds, but I want to break down the fight a little bit for you guys. I just think he's a better fighter than a lot of people give him credit for, and would have a decent chance to win this fight, despite taking the first 4 days short notice. One other fight announcement here at UFC Moscow gets a lightweight bout between Rustam Khabilov and Sergey Khandozhko. So interesting fight here. I like this matchup. Khabilov, a long-time member of the UFC lightweight division. Very good fighter. 32 years old now, so a little bit older. He is 23-4 in his career, including a 9-3 record in the UFC. So coming off the loss to Carlos Diego Ferreira, that's not a bad loss. Ferreira is a great fighter. Prior to that, a 6-fight win streak. He has a notable win over Jorge Masvidal from back in 2013. That was a great performance, a great fight, one fight of the night. He also has wins over guys like Chris Wade and Desmond Green and Vince Pichel, Yancy Medeiros. So he has some really solid wins in his career. Very, very good fighter. Taking on Sergey Khandozhko here, who he actually had a decent performance in his debut against Rustam Akhman. He's 26-5-1 in his career, so a very good record as well. The performance against Akhman, it was a good fight and a good performance there, but Akhman, he didn't look good against Jake Matthews. So looking back, maybe it wasn't that impressive as a win, but at the time it looked pretty good. This guy's a solid record, but man, you got to favor Khabilov, I think, just based on the experience in the UFC. I would definitely have to favor him in this matchup, despite Khandozhko's excellent record. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about here, and it's not official yet, so I didn't want to start the podcast off with this one, but Kabachi's reporting some really bad news for UFC Tampa guys, and I got to talk about this quickly. According to Kabachi, Joanna Jędrzejczyk will not make weight for this Saturday's fight against Michelle Waterson. So you can't be too shocked. She's had problems making weight in the past, so I'm not completely shocked by this news. However, obviously it's disappointing with the card just a few days away. According to Kabachi, that's Ralph Mariano reporting, he says that Michelle Waterson has been given two choices. She either faces Joanna this weekend at 120 pounds catch weight, or she fights Jessica Andrade at UFC 244. So we'll see what happens there. I mean, obviously, very disappointing news. You wanted to see that fight. Everyone wanted to see it between Joanna and Michelle. Made a lot of sense. But if she can't make weight, I mean, you can't blame Waterson for turning her down. According to the article, Waterson has also been offered Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Ribas, and she doesn't want to fight them. And again, you can't blame her completely. I mean, she wouldn't want to fight someone that's ranked that much lower in the division. But at the same time, Michelle Waterson's got to fight. And if UFC is giving her all these options, I think she should take one of these fights. I feel like it's kind of a bad look if she just says no to all these opponents. The card's got to be saved somehow. So I don't know what's going to happen here. I really don't know what to say, guys. Hopefully, we see that fight between Joanna and Waterson. It's not Waterson's fault that Joanna's missing weight. It's Joanna's fault. She shouldn't be fighting strawweight anymore. She's a flyweight now. She's not a strawweight anymore. But at the same time, I mean, I think Waterson's got to take a fight too. She can't just not fight. So if I had to guess, based on these options, she'll probably just wait until UFC 244 next month and fight Jessica Andrade. But she's been cutting weight too, so maybe she does want to fight this weekend. According to the story, Angela Hill's been named as a possible opponent as well for Waterson, so maybe that could happen. But it just sucks all around. And again, it's Joanna's fault. She missed weight apparently. Again, we're not 100% sure about this, but Kabachi and Ralph Mariano, very, very reliable sources, so I do trust them on this one. So I want to mention that, but again, UFC has not said anything official yet. We'll see what happens. They might announce something today. I'd have to assume they would now that the news is out there. But yeah, absolutely terrible news that we're probably going to lose the main event of UFC Tampa, but it is what it is. I mean, this is the sport, right? We've actually been pretty lucky, I think, with the main events lately. Nothing's really dropped off. Just we had the Stevens and Rodriguez fight that ended the no contest, but overall, I think we've been pretty lucky as far as fights staying together. So it is what it is. It sucks, but it's part of the sport. Fighters miss weight, and it looks like it's going to happen in the main event, which is never something you want. And the other problem with that is, if that fight drops off, the main event would probably become Cron Gracie versus Cub Swanson, and that's really not a main event. So that card is a decent card. Honestly, there's some really good fights on that card, which we broke down yesterday in the podcast. But if it loses the main event, it turns from a decent card to a very mediocre one, I think, just based on the fact that it loses the main event. And then you have Gracie versus Swanson for just 3 rounds instead. So it would suck for the fans that bought tickets. But, these things happen in sport. You're never sure if the fight's going to happen until the cage doors locked and the bell rings, and then we actually see the fight happen. Until then, fights can get canceled at any time. So we'll see what happens. Probably come back tomorrow morning and say that it's official and the fight's off. But for now, just want to mention anyways. All right, guys, that's it for today's show. Appreciate you tuning in as always to the MMAOB Daily podcast. Love doing the show and appreciate you guys listening in. All right, you guys can check me out on Twitter at MMAdammartin, and this podcast is available at MMAOddsbreaker.com. Go to our YouTube channel, like, share, subscribe. Tell your friends about it. Check me out at bjpenn.com and MMArings.net. Once again, guys, appreciate you tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow breaking down the latest in the world of MMA. Have a good day. Bye.